I now declare this 89th meeting of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts in order. I would welcome, first off, Mr. Van Kasteren, who has joined us, and also Mr. Shorey, who has joined us today. Welcome, gentlemen. Hope you enjoy your time with us. Colleagues, you will recall at the last meeting we agreed that, given the fact that if we do a full rotation of questions, there'll be time remaining, and we've already had a discussion and agreed that we will continue the rotation until the full 2 hours has expired, at which time we will adjourn. Is there anybody who has a problem with that? Good. Hearing none, thank you. We will now then turn our attention to the Spring 2013 report of the Auditor General of Canada. Colleagues, will proceed in the usual fashion. We'll ask the Auditor General to make an opening statement, and then I will then turn to the usual list of rotation for the speaking assignments. Again, anybody have a problem with where we are and where we're about to proceed to? Hearing none. Welcome, Mr. Auditor General. I would give you now the floor, give you an opportunity to introduce your delegation and to present your report and your opening remarks. Sir, you have the floor now.
Thank you. Monsieur le Président, j'ai le plaisir.
Mr. Chairman, I am pleased to present to you my Spring 2013 report, which was tabled in the House of Commons last Tuesday.
General Neil Maxwell, Nancy Chang, Jerome Berthollet, and Wendy Loschuk. Mr. Chair, we also have other members of staff with us, and I may from time to time ask one of them to join us at the table with your approval. This report reflects the broad range of activities audited by our office. It includes findings from 3 follow-up audits and 7 new audits, as well as a summary of special examination work in Crown corporations. Overall, we found many areas where the government should improve on the results it achieves with taxpayers' dollars. Les rapports le point.
Status reports present our findings from follow-up audits. In these audits, we examine whether government has made satisfactory progress on recommendations we raised in past audits. Our first follow-up audit focused on how government evaluates program effectiveness. Evaluation is a tool to improve programs and support government policy and spending decisions through evidence-based information. We found that the government had made satisfactory progress in the way it evaluates its programs. However, we also note that despite this progress, program evaluation is still not used to its full potential to support government decision-making.
Satisfactory progress in our follow-up audit that looked at the Canada Revenue Agency's efforts to collect unpaid tax debts. The timely collection of overdue accounts is one of the key components for preserving the integrity of the tax system. We found that the agency has taken a number of measures to improve the way it collects tax debts. These include new collection tools and revised workflows. The improvements the Canada Revenue Agency has made have resulted in a significant increase in the amount of tax debt being collected. However, given tax arrears of $29 billion, the agency needs to continue to work to refine and improve its tools, such as the models it uses to determine which accounts to pursue first. In the last of the 3 follow-up audits we are reporting on, we found that the government has not made satisfactory progress in addressing the recommendations we made in 2007 on safeguarding government information and assets in contracting. Protecting information and assets entrusted to contractors is critical to the government's ability to prevent misuse and unauthorized access and to achieve its security objectives. Despite a number of improvements, including a new policy on government security, significant weaknesses remain in this critical area. For example, national defense does not meet all the requirements of the new policy and has yet to approve a departmental security plan. In addition, 85 of the almost 300 contracts we reviewed over 5 departments were missing security documentation or did not follow control procedures. We observed some files where security requirements were not identified when, based on departmental policy, they should have been. Les ministères et les organismes
Departments and agencies, and in particular national defense, need to improve their practices to ensure that all security requirements are met. Let's move now to the new audit work included in this report. In the first of these audits, we looked at the official assistance that Canada provides to developing countries through multilateral organizations. In 2010-11, about $3 billion of the official development assistance spent was channeled through multilateral organizations. We found that responsible departments are doing a good job of working with multilateral organizations and monitoring their performance. However, we also found that reports to Parliament contain limited information on how aid is spent, as well as on the results achieved. I'm concerned that the information reported to Parliament is not giving a clear picture of the nature of spending on official development assistance. We also looked at the government's activities to promote the prevention and control of diabetes. The government has recognized that a joint approach is required to prevent and control diabetes in Canada. The organizations tasked with implementing this approach have to ensure that the resources put at their disposal are maximizing benefits for Canadians. The Public Health Agency has not defined how it will work with Health Canada and the Canadian Institutes of Health Research to implement and coordinate diabetes activities. The agency has not thought through what it should be trying to accomplish with the federal resources available to fight diabetes. As a result, activities remain largely uncoordinated and their impact is unknown.
Historical record of Indian residential schools describes a situation where a lack of cooperation has hindered progress. Documenting the history of Indian residential schools is an important part of the reconciliation process. At this point, with the mandate of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission running out in some 15 months, the Commission and Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development Canada have yet to agree on the work to be done. We are concerned that the lack of cooperation, delays, and looming deadline stand in the way of creating the historical record of Indian residential schools as it was intended when this process began. Our audit of search and rescue activities found that while the Canadian Forces and the Canadian Coast Guard have reacted adequately to search and rescue incidents, significant improvements are needed to ensure that the necessary personnel, equipment, and information system will be available in the future. The Air Force and the Coast Guard's ability to respond to incidents has been a testament to the dedication of search and rescue crews. We're very concerned about the sustainability of search and rescue services in coming years. In our audit of spending under the Public Security and Anti-Terrorism Initiative, we found that departments and agencies submitted progress evaluations and annual reports to the Treasury Board Secretariat. But there was no monitoring of government-wide progress towards the initiative's objectives. Between 2001 and 2009, the Treasury Board allocated about $12.9 billion to 35 departments and agencies to fund measures to enhance the security of Canadians. We believe that the government missed an opportunity to use the information it collected to generate a picture of spending and results under the Public Security and Anti-Terrorism Initiative across departments. Our audit on employment insurance overpayments identified some good practices, like using a risk-based approach and various tools to identify overpayments. However, we believe that Human Resources and Skills Development Canada is missing opportunities to recover tens of millions of dollars in overpayments each year. By improving its analysis and understanding of overpayments, Human Resources and Skills Development Canada could potentially identify more overpayments and improve on recoveries. Our audit on advanced funding to PPP Canada notes that the government is exposed to financing risks with the current arrangement of providing money to the corporation years before it is dispersed for infrastructure projects. In our view, there are approaches that would minimize the government's exposure to financing costs. The cost of financing should be considered whenever a Crown corporation seeks to receive funding ahead of its disbursement needs. Comme nous le faisons depuis plusieurs années.
As we have done for several years, this report also includes the main points from our special examination work in Crown corporations. We did not find any significant deficiencies in the corporations we examined: Farm Credit Canada, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and the Old Port of Montreal Corporation. However, we have raised some concerns about the Old Port of Montreal Corporation.
Statement, nous serions heureux de répondre à vos questions.
We'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
And we'll now begin the rotation in the usual fashion. First member to have the floor is Mr. Saxton. You now have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the Auditor General and to the Assistant Auditors General for being here today as well, and thank you for this report. Mr. Ferguson, first of all, can you share with the committee what you consider to be the top three most urgent chapters that you've identified in this report?
Mr. Chair, there are a number of chapters here, and I think all of them contain significant information. Certainly, if I go down through the list, I would say something like the status report on security and contracting contains some serious concerns. And I would also say that the audit on search and rescue would also be one, and I think also the audit on creating a historical record of Indian residential schools would probably be the three that I would choose, although there's significant issues in all of the chapters.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Now, some people have been claiming that the government lost $3 billion. Is this an accurate portrayal of your report?
What we reported in the chapter on spending on public security and anti-terrorism initiative was that there was $12.9 billion worth of budget allocations to some 35 departments and agencies. When we looked at the reports that agencies made to Treasury Board Secretariat about their spending under these initiatives, it totaled $9.8 billion, so a difference of roughly $3 billion that we tried to get an explanation for why there's that difference between the budget and the actual, and we were not able to get that explanation. So what we were trying to do was understand what that difference was and where it came from, and that's how I would characterize what that report included.
Thank you. Now, can you please tell me if the reports that were done by the Public Security and Anti-Terrorism Initiative, or more commonly known as PSAT, if the PSAT reports were for internal government use or for external use?
My understanding is that the reports were given to Treasury Board Secretariat as part of Treasury Board Secretariat's role in monitoring these initiatives, and we expected that they would then be used as a summary reporting tool to Treasury Board itself. So all of that is internal reporting. That summary report, there was never a summary report prepared for Treasury Board, however.
Okay. Now, during this period of time, did individual departments report their normal planned spending and actual spending to Parliament?
Certainly, there's the normal process whereby departments report their budget and actuals across all of their activities, and that goes on every year.
Okay, thank you. Regarding Chapter 7, Federal Search and Rescue Activities, does the Coast Guard accept the findings of the audit?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The Coast Guard agreed with all of our recommendations.
Now, Mr. Ferguson, you have noted in your report that the Canadian Armed Forces and the Canadian Coast Guard adequately respond to air and marine search and rescue incidents and meet established standards of readiness. Canada, of course, is a large country, and search and rescue does cross a number of different jurisdictions. You indicate concerns about the sustainability of the program and suggest that the government should systematically analyze data. Can you explain what kinds of things you'd like to see analyzed, and has this been done before, and if so, what conclusions were found?
The type of data that we were referring to, that we referred to, was information about the individual incidents, the reaction time of the Coast Guard and of the Canadian forces. So they had captured information about reaction time to incidents, but we noted that they could use better use of that information to try to determine if there were other things they could do to improve their reaction time. So certainly what we noted was that there was room for them to improve the use of information.
Okay, now in your report you note that there's a definite need to replace search and rescue aircraft. Given the scope of the country and the fact that we will use this equipment for many years to come, how important is it that the government engage with industry to make sure that we get the right aircraft?
Mr. Chair, that's not, I can't really answer the extent to which the government needs to engage with industry, but certainly it's important for the government to make sure that the right aircraft are acquired that can do the job of search and rescue.
Okay, sorry, time has expired, Mr. Saxton. Moving along, Mr. Allen, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Auditor General, and thank you to all for being here today. Mr. Auditor General, if I could take you to Chapter 8, and it's actually at page 5 under the subheading "What's Important" or "Why It's Important." Excuse me. You talk about $12.9 billion being allocated, but I look down to about the fourth line where it talks about Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat with an additional $2.75 million over 5 years to gather information on behalf of the Treasury Board. I'm assuming that's additional monies beyond $12.9 billion. Is that correct? To use to do information gathering and reporting mechanisms. Is that what that's telling me?
Yes, that was money that was specifically allocated for the Treasury Board Secretariat to do some of these monitoring activities.
And so I would take us now to page 10 in the English version under 8.19, where it talks about that we noted, I'm quoting here from 8.19, we noted that the Secretariat required departments to report this information in order to support them in fulfilling their requirements, to review annual reports and evaluations, to provide summary reports to the Treasury Board, and to assess and make recommendations. So the sense that money was allocated to help folks prepare reports, in your sense, is that where that money should have been allocated to, in the sense of, not in the sense of is it appropriate, but that money should have been used to develop these types of reports so that that reporting mechanism actually gets done, and we might have actually seen a summary report, because I'll take you to the next piece. I know you know where it is, Mr. Ferguson, I'll point it out for you in the sense of easier to find it quickly, that there were no summary reports done.
Certainly the amount that was allocated was, again, to support the Treasury Board Secretariat in their monitoring activities. They did collect data, they did prepare a database, so they did undertake some activities. But we certainly felt that the end result of all of that should have been a summary report that could go to Treasury Board that would explain the spending and would explain the results achieved through these initiatives.
And so I'll take you to the next page, which is 11. Talks about in the sidebar, you've got what's called a challenge function. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Basically, it's a sense of challenge the department to tell us what happened with money. If you didn't spend it or you reallocated it, you pushed it around somewhere else, you found something else you needed to do, you just sort of came up with a different way you wanted to do something because it was more important. And I noticed you talk about that the challenge function was there, but you say in paragraph 8.23, however, financial information on reallocation was not captured. And so, sir, in light of the fact that we got $2.3 million to capture information, we're supposed to do summary reports, we didn't do them, we're supposed to challenge reallocations, are we now saying they actually didn't do that? So all of these bits have not been done?
In terms of the challenge function and related to reallocations, as I understand it, what occurred was there would have been specific requests for reallocations, and those specific requests would have undergone a challenge function. In the database, I believe all they captured was whether a reallocation happened or not, and that's why we say that in terms of the reallocations in the database, they didn't capture the financial information related to each of those reallocations.
So I also noticed just below that in 824, in 2010, Treasury Board, the Secretariat's request to end government-wide reporting requirements on initiative spending, which actually, when you say initiative spending, you actually defined that earlier in the report, where it talks about what is the five pieces of the initiative, and what I would, Mr. Chair, read them into the record. The 5 initiative objectives are keeping terrorists out of Canada, deterring, preventing, detecting, and prosecuting and/or removing terrorists, facilitating relations between Canada and the United States, supporting international initiatives, and protecting Canada's infrastructure. So based on that, Mr. Ferguson, is a reporting mechanism actually still there, or has it totally disappeared, or has a new one been struck yet?
I'll ask Ms. Loschuk to answer that.
Thank you, Chair. As we point out in here, the Treasury Board Secretariat has stopped collecting data from the departments in terms of the annual reports, and are in the process of putting together another framework that they hope to have in place by, I think, sometime in 2014. It's in their response to our recommendation.
So, just so I can crystallize it in my mind, the report's telling me we had a framework to report a certain way. We didn't do the reporting the way we were supposed to do it, so we didn't do summary reports. We don't know how to, and I'm not suggesting they lost. I said lost track, actually, is how and I believe that's kind of how the sense is. They lost track of $3.1 billion. And now, they couldn't do it before in Treasury Board. Now they don't have a reporting mechanism at all, and they're not about to have one until 2014. And if I read this correctly, they finished reporting mechanism in 2010. So for the past 3 years and the next year, there is no reporting at all. So whatever money goes in there, we won't know. Is that a fair question?
I think, Mr. Chair, to be able to answer specifically, I think it's really a question that the department needs to answer. Our audit only went up to, in this time period. And at the end of this time period, this method of reporting was stopped. They said they were going to do a pilot project and move into some other method. Exactly what they've done outside this time frame, we can't really talk to.
Okay, sorry, time has expired. Thank you. Over to Mr. Cramp, who now has the floor, sir.
Well, thank you, Chair, and certainly welcome to the Auditor General and all the principals. It's good to see you back here again, and I can assure you that on behalf of the committee, we thank you for the great work you do, and certainly it's just not only a short-term but a long-term benefit to all Canadians. So we do thank you. I'm going to just focus a little bit on search and rescue. It's a bit of matter of fact, it's pretty significant interest to me, and that, of course, that I live right beside Trenton CFB. really a wonderful home to a lot of the SARS people, and I spend a lot of time there. And I have tremendous admiration for just the magnificent work and dedication of our emergency personnel. When you see it firsthand, it is incredible. So I have just a few questions I would like to ask. I understand the response times, and I've seen them personally. That's why, of course, but I'm not there for all of them. But of course, the response times of your audit, and you demonstrated that our Canadian Armed Forces crews frequently surpassed the mandated response times. Can you tell us about the findings and how you would relate that?
Mr. Chair, what we were specifically looking at was what's referred to as reaction time, which is the time between when the crews are tasked to the point in time that they actually are able to depart on the mission. There are specific service standards both within the Canadian Coast Guard and within the Canadian Air Force. There are specific service standards there. We noted that in the vast majority of cases, the two services were able to meet their service standards, and in many cases they were able to react in under the amount of time that they had established for those. There were some cases where the amount of time was beyond the service standard, but again, we noted that that even in those cases it was often within sort of a 10-minute difference.
Fine, thank you. Well, given the complexities of preparing aircraft and getting up and going and putting personnel in and training, with everything that's involved in an emergency mission, as a former emergency response individual myself, I can appreciate the tremendous work that they do. When I see it firsthand, I'm honestly, I'm very, very impressed. We, of course, in this country, have the second largest land mass in the world, and we have the largest coastline, so quite an enormous challenge to work with. And my information has led me to believe that we respond to approximately 9,400 incidents. We're tasked our military aircraft for over 1,100 cases, and we assist over 20,000 people. Of course, in doing that requires personnel, a significant number of personnel, and the Auditor General's report found that there were occasionally personnel shortages within the realm of the trained SARS personnel. So can you assure us, though, that that has not led to a deletion or at a total inability of not being able to respond? Did you find that search and rescue operations are being maintained? And further to that, were you able to ascertain whether or not National Defense has any process in place to deal with these shortages?
Again, Mr. Chair, what we looked at was the reaction time, and we indicated sort of the results in there. I think in terms of where there, so I can't speak to sort of the whole response, but I think we did notice a number of cases. I don't remember the exact number on the Coast Guard, for example, where they had to get exemptions from having specific personnel with specific skills on board for some of those missions. So that was one item that we identified. But again, in terms of at the operational level, both the Canadian Forces and the Coast Guard, the function seems to be working well, and again, I think that is a testament to the people that are involved.
Well, thank you. And of course, following up on that, then I understand the Auditor General did find that the National Defense, in consultation with Fisheries and Oceans in Canada, should build on just exactly what you said. Though they should develop an updated search and rescue mission management system, and I believe that is already underway. Is it not?
My understanding is that that task of replacing the information technology system has started.
Fine, thank you very much. Okay, regarding the SAR contribution program, the new initiatives fund that was administered by the National Search and Rescue Syariat, it was examined, but I understand that opportunities for improvement were identified. I'd like to know what some of those opportunities for improvement were.
Mr. Chair, I believe that what we noted on that is there was roughly $8 million that was being spent on different initiatives through that fund. Essentially, I believe that we were identifying that they need to assess what's being achieved with that money and take some lessons learned out of that to determine, whether these types of programs are being effective, what types of programs are effective, and then how to leverage that and make sure the money's going towards the most effective programs.
Well, thank you very much.
Very good. Thank you. Over now to Madame Blachette-Labotte. You have the floor, ma'am.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Monsieur...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ferguson, in your opening statement, you say, and I quote, regarding search and rescue, in the future years, we are very concerned, and an expert such as you chooses his words carefully. You could have said that you were concerned. You said you were very concerned, very concerned. We are very concerned about the sustainability of search and rescue services in coming years. Could you explain why you were very concerned?
Chair, there were fundamentally three areas that we were concerned about. One is the state of the equipment, particularly on the Air Force side, where we indicated that there are some aircraft that have been used for 45 years and they are having to manufacture spare parts. So we have issues on significant concerns on the equipment side for the Air Force. On the personnel side, we noted that often the personnel that are actually reacting to incidents have to keep working. They don't have time to do their training and that type of thing. They don't have time to take their leave. So the burden is resting with the same people. And then we noted that the information technology system is aging. So all three of those together led us to be concerned about the sustainability of the program.
Merci. Et j'imagine que la situation actuelle...
I imagine that the present situation is worrisome, but you say it's the sustainability of search and rescue services that is a concern. Does that mean that if there are no serious changes made as of now, in the future the situation could be worse and even more of a concern?
And certainly we are, as I said, we're concerned when there's aircraft of that age. Also, we identified helicopters that can't get to Northern Ontario without refueling and don't have de-icing facilities on them. So, we are concerned about the sustainability. I can't say, is this something that is going to be problematic in 1 year, 3 years, or 5 years? But certainly it's a concern for the future.
Merci, Monsieur Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. You say in paragraph 7.26 of this chapter that the standards for service are based upon the resources and not the needs. I would like to hear you on this. To your knowledge, have there been changes announced in this regard? Are the authorities going to take into account the needs in the future? Have you heard anything from the department in this regard?
That was what our finding was that right now the standards are set based on the resources that are available. And we noted in the chapter that there is not an overall strategy related to search and rescue. If there was that overall strategy, that's the place where we would expect to find something that helps identify service standards on the basis of, what are the needs, what are the intended reaction times, and from that, the service standards would be established. So I think really what we would expect to see is that overall strategy related to search and rescue.
Merci. Dans votre recommandation...
Thank you. You recommend that there be analyses done, analyses of data, so that in the future it would be possible to at least know the needs in order to react to those needs. You'll correct me if I'm mistaken, but my question is the following. Carrying out analyses is most certainly an important first step, but once you have the analysis, am I mistaken, or must there also be measures put in place? It's not sufficient to determine the needs. One also has to define political, concrete action to be taken in order for these needs to be at the very core of the orientation of services. Am I right or wrong?
The recommendation was that the analysis needs to happen, that needs to be based on needs, so that then, within a comprehensive strategy, sort of the service standards and the expectations can be laid out. So that analysis would be core to determining, what the response time should be and what people can expect from this service.
Merci. Mais est-ce que vous êtes d'accord avec moi?
Thank you. But do you agree with me to say that the analysis is a important first step, but it's not sufficient? You also have to plan and make sure that you have the resources for the appropriate decisions.
Later in the chapter, we have the recommendation about putting together that overall strategy related to search and rescue.
Merci. Si je reviens au...
Thank you. Coming back now to the helicopters and airplanes that are available, the fleet that's available to search and rescue operators. Can you tell me what the material is like, if it's sufficient for present-day needs based on what we know?
With the equipment, certainly, again, we found, as I said, aircraft that's been in service for 45 years. The helicopters that can't get to northern Ontario or northern Quebec without being refueled. So we've got significant concerns on the Air Force side related to equipment. On the Coast Guard side, we found that the equipment was adequate.
Very good. Thank you. Time's expired. Merci, Madame. Over to Mr. Dreeshen. You have the floor now, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Auditor General, and all of the other principals. What I'd like to speak to is Chapter 10, so we're dealing with public-private partnerships, and discuss some of the ways in which the analysis has been done there. So first of all, I'm just wondering if the Auditor General could just confirm to the committee and for Canadians that the scope of the audit was not on public-private partnerships per se, but on the technical funding arrangement between the government and this Crown Corporation.
Mr. Chair, this audit was a very specific audit looking at one specific question, which was essentially the method by which the government provides funding to PPP Canada. It was not in any way an assessment of any of the projects that PPP Canada undertakes.
Thank you very much. Now, as we know, the P3 contracts are typically these long-term engagements which require specific financing to leverage their performance and innovation. So, and I think it's important for taxpayers in order to divest the risk associated with the design and the construction, the maintenance of the operation of these long-term investment projects. I'm just wondering, though, there's a discussion with regards to the blended average interest rates that were analyzed. The department had taken some numbers and worked at it in one way and found that there was very little difference between what they had to pay for interest versus what they were getting back on their investments. I believe that your department as well took a look at it, maybe from a different angle, but more or less came to to similar conclusions. So I'm just wondering if you could comment on that.
Mr. Chair, the analysis that we did was we looked at the amount of money that had been borrowed by the government and paid to PPP Canada. We then assessed what we felt would have been the carrying cost, I guess, the interest cost of the government to borrow that, and compared it to what PPP Canada had earned. Obviously, in doing that type of an analysis, there are assumptions that are made, but we feel that we came up with what would be the best point estimate of that. There was a slight difference in cost. I believe it was $1.6 million that we felt over the time period we looked at would have been the cost of that. But even without that, we are raising the issue that when the government borrows, and the government borrows for certain durations or at a certain credit rating, and then PPP Canada invests for different durations or into assets with a different credit rating, that there's a difference there. There's a risk. There's an exposure, either a credit exposure or a duration exposure. So that's why we were raising the fact that that we believe in the time period we looked at there was a cost, about $1.6 million, but we're also concerned about the potential for financing risks.
So then in 10.14, when you were talking, it says, using this approach, the department found that the government's borrowing rate would be slightly less than PPP Canada's rate of return on its investments, and the results was a savings to the government for 2011, 2012. Is it a case of us looking at what they might have been able to get back in the 2010, perhaps, when you were looking at this, and a difference with 2011 and 12?
Certainly in the analysis that we did in 11-12, in that last year, it looked like PPP Canada earned more than what the cost of borrowing was. But again, I think it's important to remember that you can't borrow at a AAA rating and invest in a AAA rating in the same duration on the same day and make money. So in order for there to be a way to earn money in this fashion, the amount that was borrowed either had to be invested for a different time frame than it was borrowed for, or had to be invested in something that had a different credit rating, and that results in exposure on the financing side.
Speaking then to exposure in 1017, you've talked about, it says in your view, the approach is it would minimize the government's exposure to financing costs. One of them, of course, is a written guarantee from the government that a P3 funding is available upon request close to the time of the corporation's distributions. But you also speak to corporation status could be changed from a non-agent to an agent of the Crown for the purpose of administering the P3 Canada Fund. And again, the third point was the corporation could deposit its advance funding in the Consolidated Revenue Fund. It's permitted under the Financial Administration Act, but how does the PPP take a look at that? I mean, they have their own responsibilities as well. Is there any type of issue that they would have seen?
I think, Mr. Chair, you know, what we were concerned about was the fact that PPP Canada had, I believe it was somewhere over $700 million that they have to invest. They will get more you know, under the current program, and then as I understand it, there was also some other money announced in the budget. So given that these are starting to get to be large sums of money, we feel that there needs to be a way of making sure that those finance risks are managed. You know, the government's not in the business of borrowing money to then, you know, to then invest it to try to end up making money. So we feel that this exposure needs to be managed.
Right, no, time's expired, Mr. Dreeshen. Thank you. And over to Mr. Byrne. You, sir, now have the floor.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you to members of the Auditor General and members of your staff. Quick question on Chapter 8. Could you help clear up some confusion, and I think in many people's minds exists. If the government can't readily identify specifics of what $3.1 billion was spent on, how can Parliament be confident it was spent properly and within statutory and policy guidelines?
What we were looking for again was, okay, this was a very large initiative. This was a horizontal initiative. It included a lot of departments. And it had specific identified objectives, so things that were trying to be achieved. Also, there was this mechanism put in place for Treasury Board Secretariat to collect information that could be used you know, for monitoring purposes. And we felt that that would have been the important information to produce summary level data about what was spent, you know, what was it spent on, and what was achieved. That wasn't done, so there's no overall summary picture that can go forward to anybody. Now, in general, of course, any dollar that goes out of the federal government's bank account is subject to all of the controls in place in those departments. But that doesn't mean that it's captured in a way that it can be reported against this type of initiative.
Understood. Thanks. But in this context, we had a situation not long ago where there was abuse of parliamentary authority. Parliament had voted and authorized certain expenditures for the Canada Border Infrastructure Fund. We later found out that it was spent on gazebos 200 kilometers away from the border. Is there a risk that some of the $3.1 billion may not have necessarily been spent on what Parliament had approved it for?
Certainly the first part of trying to answer that question is to look at, what was the budget appropriation and what was spent, and then trying to analyze that difference. The one thing that was occurring, though, in this case was that there was this process for reallocation, and they were tracking when reallocations happened. There's just nothing captured in terms of the total amount of the reallocations. So what's hard to say is how much of that difference was, things that were just not spent, how much of it were things that were reallocated and went through the proper process to be reallocated. But then, it's not possible, based on the information we have, to answer the question of whether anything was spent on things outside of these initiatives.
So, Mr. Auditor General, Mr. Ferguson, you would suggest to the committee that there is a risk, then?
I guess I would have to say that there would be a risk because there is not enough information to answer the question completely.
Thank you very much. Regarding Chapter 7, Search and Rescue, the government released today, I'm sure you're aware of, what I can only suppose to be was intended to be projected as an action plan related to your report. I'll applaud you, sir, because what took many, many people, an effort of many, many people and many organizations, a long time to produce, you, through the use of your performance audit, has goaded the government on to action immediately and on a very sensitive issue. In today's action plan, if the government wants to call it that, on search and rescue, 95% of spending was on satellites or satellite function, 2/3 of which was simply on renewing a subscription to an existing satellite system. In your report, does the word satellite appear anywhere?
Mr. Chair, I guess given that there's 11 chapters, I don't remember every single word that we used.
I'm being a bit facetious, Mr. Ferguson. Let me ask you this. Did you indicate to Parliament through your report that you had any concerns about satellite availability, satellite access, or the future of satellite availability? Was that mentioned within any chapter, any paragraph of the report?
The thing that we did mention was a need to put more clarity around the use of beacons. To the extent that that has an impact on satellites and satellite usages, I can't really speak to that specifically, but we did say that there was more action that needed to be taken on the policy around beacons.
I think also what you said was that there was an issue about analog systems versus digital systems in the beacons, and that you had suggested that there was need to for the Transport Canada to move forward on moving the system, marine management system, to digital systems, while analog systems really don't afford a whole lot of protection. But I'll leave that, because now on the issue, you really raised a key issue, which is the Search and Rescue Mission Information Management System. You reported that the system was on the breaking point. An effort had begun to replace it just 5 months ago after a very serious systems failure in 2009, and that you did not expect that system to be that new system to be completed until 2015-2016. In today's report, there is something about an information management system, but it's called the Search and Rescue Asset Management System. And it seems to me that it's exclusively surrounding Department of National Defense and Coast Guard aircraft, making sure that the government can coordinate where aircraft are. Whereas, if I understand correctly, the Search and Rescue Mission Management System is a highly evolved, it's a very complex piece of software that actually tracks on-the-ground personnel, other organizations, everything related to a search and rescue mission. The two are very different, I believe, based on what I'm reading.
Hurry, Mr. Byrne, please.
Would you be able to make a comment on whether or not the government has actually succeeded and met that requirement of replacing the Search and Rescue Mission Management System through a Search and Rescue Asset Management System directed at the government's assets only?
I'm afraid it'll have to be brief, sir.
It can be brief, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
I can't comment on what the government has said that they are about to do, so I can't answer the question.
Very good. Thank you. Time's expired. Well expired. Over now to Mr. Aspin. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome, Mr. Ferguson and your officials. Welcome back. My questioning is on Chapter 9, the EI chapter, but before I get into that chapter, I'd just like to quote something from the report. from yourself, sir. It says, and this is a direct quote from you, it's, quote, "We didn't find anything that gave us cause for concern that money was used in any way it should not have been." So that indicates to me that no money was lost or missing. Can you confirm that, sir? Can you agree with that statement?
Mr. Chair, as was commented, what I said was we didn't see anything that gave us cause for concern. That doesn't mean that I can give audit assurance level that there was nothing. It means that we didn't see anything in what we were looking at that put any sort of red flags in front of us that said we would need to do a lot more work on this, but I cannot say unequivocally, I can't comment unequivocally on what the money was spent for.
Okay, thank you, sir. Chapter 9, the EI chapter, and there's some good news there. You've, generally speaking, your audit on employment insurance overpayments identified some good practices, but I'd like to just kind of zero in on kind of maybe a perspective, a loss question. Would you be able to answer this for me, sir? How much money of ineligible claims are not recovered by Service Canada each year? In other words, what I'm getting at is what is the percentage of total claims that this represents?
The percentage of total claims, I believe the amount for the total claims is in the chapter as, there's $16.1 billion in income benefits paid every year. I believe that the number for the amount of identified overpayments each year is around $300 million. That's identified, with roughly another $560 million estimated of unidentified. So I'm not exactly sure which two numbers you want me to compare. Also, I guess at the end of this particular fiscal year, there was in total $660 million worth of overpayments outstanding, of which the department had estimated 2/3 of it would not be collected.
Okay. Are there any comparators that you could use that could be used as a benchmark as to how we do relative to any other jurisdictions? Have you taken a look at this, the broader scope kind of thing?
Mr. Chair, to the best of my recollection, that was not part of the audit.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if you can briefly comment on the importance of measures such as the recent EI stewardship review that was conducted as an audit for the EI program to obtain better data on the number of ineligible claims.
Mr. Chair, that's something that was not part of the focus of our audit. So again, it's not something that I can comment on.
Okay. Government is committed to making sure Canadians who have paid into the system and lose their jobs through no fault of their own can have access to EI when they need it. We all know that's the general objective. Would you be able to comment on how ensuring the integrity of the EI system is helping ensure that money is there for Canadians when they need it?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, in the report, we do identify that it is important to maintain the integrity of the EI system, and one function of doing that is to make sure that overpayments that are identified are recovered. It's important for people to understand that benefits will be paid, and they will obtain the benefits that they are due and that they can have, but also that the department will identify overpayments and will recover them. That's important to the integrity of this system.
Okay.
Time's expired, sir.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Moving along, Monsieur Giguère, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I wish to thank the people from the Office of the Auditor General for coming here to meet with us. I want to deal with Chapter 11, the old part of Montreal. My first question pertains to travel expenses in particular. There were travel expenses that were paid twice. Some expenditures that have nothing to do with the mission of the corporation. Hospitality expenses as well that are quite hefty. My question is this because of a flagrant lack of respect for taxpayers' money, or might this lead to a police investigation?
I've asked Mr. René Beliveau to join us at the table, who is responsible for this work. Mr. Chair, in general, what we did was we looked at the policies in place for travel and hospitality at the Old Port of Montreal. We identified that there were some weaknesses in those policies and that those need to be improved. At this point, it's really information that has been turned over to the board that is now responsible for the Old Port, and it's really for them to determine what to do in terms of the items that we found, but specifically our recommendation was for them to improve their policies, put in place better controls over the spending.
Very well. It was also indicated that with regard to these practices, there was no documentation with regard to the negotiation of leases with some concessions, and would that not lead to some type of nepotism? And might it hinder the funding, the financing of this corporation if there's no memory, no tracking of the leases signed, because there is no documentation in support of the cost, the price asked by partners? There is documentation in the files. We didn't find all the documentation. It doesn't mean that the corporation had no control over the needs for the various concessions, etc. What we have, Mr. Chairman, is the following. We noted that the lack of documentation in the future might lead to problems with regard to the corporate memory. This corporate memory problem is outlined on pages 41 and 42 in the French version, where there are matters of problems of documentation on risks, management, human resources, communications, assets, travel expenditures. These are major deficiencies, it would seem, for a Crown corporation, which, I would remind you, has ethics standards, ethical rules that apply to the whole of the public service. They're all the same, and they apply to all Crown corporations. So this leads to a problem, a critical problem. What was management doing? Did management have the necessary qualifications to deal with relatively simple management, day-to-day management problems? A very good question, Mr. Chairman. In fact, the documentation, what it provides is this. We cannot say that the corporation wasn't aware of the problems, that management wasn't doing follow-up, wasn't accounting for all of this to the board. Rather, it didn't take the time to properly document the key decisions and the actions it was to take, such that the corporate memory, yet again, might be in difficulty in the future. Based on your recommendations, they've responded saying that they would correct the situation as of the 31st of March 2014. That is when they're planning on correcting or updating their ethics rules. Isn't that an unacceptable timeline, given that this problem should never have existed? It's an answer that management provided. It does seem to be a long timeline. However, we must take into account the fact that the corporation must now be merged with the CLC, and management has already taken measures to correct the situation. But these measures must be reviewed with the main company to resolve the whole issue.
Thank you, Auditor General, and your team for being here today. I'm going to focus a little bit on Chapter 3, which is the chapter that deals with the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency. I thought it contained a lot of tax debt and tax information that had a lot of interesting details. And I'll get to my question. Although the growth in tax debt has received some attention, your report also notes that CRA collection of those amounts has increased at the same time. So I suppose in fact, your report notes that CRA recovered $40 billion in tax debt last year. Can you expand on the growth in CRA's tax debt collections, please?
Mr. Chair, we did identify that the amount of tax debt collected for the same number of collectors went from $21.5 billion in 2006, the last time we looked at this, to $40 billion in 2012 for the same number of full-time equivalent staff. So there has been a significant increase in, I guess, sort of the efficiency of the tax collection activity.
Right. And just an aside question, how has kind of the CRA's tax base changed? I mean, obviously, you have the size of the economy, which is going to impact revenue growth. But I'm curious if the harmonization of tax and if CRA is doing more now in that area. So in fact, the volumes are growing at the same time.
Mr. Chair, we noted in paragraph 3.9 that between the last time we did this audit and this time, in 2009, for example, the Canada Revenue Agency began administering the Ontario corporate tax. In 2010, they began collecting harmonized sales tax for British Columbia and Ontario. So certainly between the two audits, there was a difference in the base taxes that Canada Revenue Agency was managing.
Right. And would you say that in times of economic distress or difficulty, the job of the tax collector is more difficult?
Mr. Chair, I guess I'm not sure that I would say that the job of a tax collector is ever particularly easy.
Not quite what I asked, but I take your point.
But certainly, you know, with the amount of taxes that they are trying to collect, this is a significant task.
Yeah. I'll move on. Thank you. A major concern raised in the 2006 report was CRA's lack of information and research on the tax debt. In this most recent report, you note that, and I quote, the agency has significantly more comprehensive and complete management information than we reported in 2006, end quote. Can you expand on how CRA has improved the quality and availability of research and information on its tax debt?
Mr. Chair, I think, for example, in paragraph 3.53, we do talk about the fact that the agency had conducted research in a variety of areas, such as how the debt arose and the associated debtor characteristics, what specific research was conducted on industries that were perceived to be high risk, and the impact that economic indicators would have on new tax debt. So there were research activities that happened. The organization does have more information to understand sort of the makeup of the tax debt. However, in terms of the makeup of the tax debt, for example, they really didn't have very much in 2006. Mm-hmm. So while they have improved, there is still room for them to make more improvements.
Right. I'm sure it's at the foot of the report. What is the agency's response to your recommendations?
Mr. Chair, my recollection is that the agency agreed with all of our recommendations.
Okay. Chair, do I have time for one more?
You do.
All right. Your report mentioned that following the 2006 report, the CRA created a new national approach to tax debt collection. Let me quote again from your report. quote, this new national approach to managing the inventories of accounts allows for a more efficient use of staff and earlier attention to accounts, end quote. And later you note, quote, the agency has improved how it distributes accounts to collectors, end quote. Can you please expand on how this new national approach has improved collections on behalf of Canadian taxpayers?
We do cite the example of now if there's a tax debt that needs to be collected that does not require face-to-face intervention. So, for example, if there's a taxpayer in Toronto that tax debt needs to be collected from, it doesn't require face-to-face intervention, but there's not somebody available in Toronto to work the file. That file could be worked by somebody that's in a different part of the country. So that means that there are not the same bottlenecks that used to exist, so the files can be spread out and worked from anywhere in the country.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Moving along, Mr. Byrne, you have the floor again, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just picking up on my question about Chapter 8, would it be helpful to you indicated to us, Mr. Ferguson, that the $3.1 billion there was a risk that it was not spent properly and within statutory and policy guidelines. Would it be valuable for the government to be able to provide to Parliament some assurance that it was spent within statutory and policy guidelines to ensure that and to erase that risk?
You know, Mr. Chair, I guess I need to make sure again that this issue is understood. You know, the spending within the departments would have undergone sort of normal control procedures in those departments. So there are internal controls in departments about spending, and they would go through all of those normal processes. We didn't identify anything that would cause us to see to say that we felt anything was going on outside of those processes. However, what we were identifying was, you know, there were these specific budget amounts for these initiatives. There was reporting. There was this difference, and we don't know what the reason for that difference is. We've also identified, I guess, in the chapter that because this goes back 10 years, it may be difficult to try to recreate all of that history. So I guess, Mr. Chair, it's simply a statement of fact about that's what we found, and that's where things are at this point in time.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Ferguson. Regarding the chapter on search and rescue, you had indicated, and I'll slow down a little bit because I want to get this question in when I was rushing earlier. Search and rescue mission information management system. You had indicated that a revised or a renewed system would not be available likely until 2015, 2016. That the system, that critical information, search and rescue management information system was at the breaking point. You indicated that a replacement for the system began about 5 months ago, but wouldn't be ready till 2015, 2016. I'm concerned that the government may be wanting to do a bit of a smokescreen here with today's announcement. So I won't ask you whether or not you believe the search and rescue asset management system provides the same function as the search and rescue mission management system does. But I'll ask you this. Is it reasonable, based on your previous findings, is it reasonable that within 5 months they were able to not only identify what needed to be put in place for the search and rescue mission management system, construct it, and then put it into effect in 5 months? Is that probable? Is that possible?
Mr. Chair, the only information that I can go on is, you know, what we were told, which was that implementation of a new integrated system is not expected in 2015-16. That's what we were told at the time of the audit. I can't speak to what may have been said outside of this.
It seems to me, though, Mr. Ferguson, and I appreciate the position because you can only speak to this committee as to what exactly you audited, not what was announced today, but in terms of a reasonable person assessing this, this does seem to be the government offering a bit of a smokescreen, because it seems to me that the Search and Rescue Mission Management Information System is a vital piece of technology that crashed in 2008. You identified that system in your audit. Do you have any knowledge, any information that the crash and subsequent destabilization of the Search and Rescue Mission Management software system may have led to an adverse or unfortunate result from 2009 till the time of the conclusion of your audit? Was that the failure of that system or the lack of functioning of that system, did that contribute to an unfortunate result or a less than desirable result in terms of a search and rescue management mission?
Mr. Chair, we didn't link any of the sort of risks related to this system to any specific incident, I guess, if I understand the question. What I can say is, if the system is not operating, then the system has to resort to a manual system for, plotting out the search routes and that type of thing. Of course, if it goes to a manual system, then that will take more time in reacting. But we didn't identify sort of the impact on any particular incident.
Sorry, time has expired, Mr. Byrne. Moving over to Mr. Van Kasteren. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here with us this afternoon. I want to go to Chapter 11, Farm Credit. Farm credit is quite important in my neck of the woods. I know I oftentimes have farmers coming into my office telling me how thankful they are to have an organization. Now, sir, you've in the report you have you talk about, first of all, you praised the identifying, measuring, monitoring, reporting risks. And then you go on to suggest that we should possibly be appointing a chief risk officer. Are we not? I'm wondering, how does a survey opinion of one individual, how might it lend to greater success when we have a proven system in place already? Are we maybe just introducing another spoon into the soup and just causing some more confusion rather than when we got a good thing going?
Mr. Chair, this was a special exam that we did on the Farm Credit Corporation. When we do a special examination, our objective, the scope of the work that we do is established, and we look to see whether there are any significant deficiencies, and we have to essentially opine on whether there are any significant deficiencies in specific systems. In this case, we did not find that. We simply made the observation that that they should consider whether they need a chief risk officer just to help understand how all of the different risks fit together. So we're not identifying it as a significant deficiency in any way. We're just saying it's something that they should consider, and it's up to the corporation to really determine whether that is something that would add value to them.
But I understand, and I just want to make sure that I understand this, that the organization is functioning quite well in that capacity. It's just that this could be an improvement to that organization. Is that correct? Have I got that?
Again, Mr. Chair, the overall conclusion here was there were no significant deficiencies in their control operations. So these things are being managed at a level that is adequate. This was simply something that we were suggesting.
Thank you, sir. Then the report also recognizes that the loan portfolio has increased by nearly $20 billion over 5 years. This is an enormous success story. Then the report goes on to criticize FCC for not reflecting on how successful it has been in achieving critical outcomes. Don't you agree that Farm Credit has expanded with economic success and continues to serve and represent hardworking Canadian farmers all the while remaining task-orientated? Is it again? There just seems to be a little bit of a discrepancy there in what on the one hand, what you attribute to its success, and then on the other hand, you criticize it for not being able to achieve critical outcomes.
I think, Mr. Chair, it's always, we would have this type of observation for many organizations. What's critical is in performance measure is trying to determine what outcomes is the organization trying to achieve, what performance information you can gather around that, and then how you assess whether it's achieving its intended objectives. We find many cases where organizations are only able to measure activities, and the activities they do, they're not able to measure sort of the results and the outcomes. And we encourage all organizations to continue to work towards bettering their ability to have performance measures based on outcomes. So, we found with the Farm Credit Corporation that there was room for them to try to improve in this area, but I would say that's not something that would be an unusual finding for us in many organizations.
How much time do I have?
A minute.
Half a minute. Very quickly. Again, you write that Farm Credit has put in place process for identifying, measuring, monitoring, and reporting on risks. And then despite this, though, again, you make the recommendation for a chief risk officer. Is it the same answer that you're giving in the first question that I had, that yes, they're doing a good job, but this just may be an improvement to the way it could be run?
I guess sort of the way that we've got it worded is the corporation would benefit from the position of a chief risk officer, as it would help senior management and the board understand the interrelationships in various types of risks. So what we're saying is that I guess really this would be perhaps the next layer of sophistication of maturity in their approach to risk management, would be to have this type of a position. It's for them to consider. We did not find any serious deficiencies in the control environment of this organization.
You're going good. Let's just take it up to the next level.
Again, this would be this. Again, I can only say it the way that I've said it, Mr. Chair. There are no significant deficiencies. There may be some room for improvement.
Thanks, Mr. Ferguson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Van Kasteren. And now over to Mr. Allen. You now have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Ferguson, I'm actually going to look at Chapter 2, specifically around page 55, 2.18. There's a task force created and it's supposed to talk about security, to ensure that security of government contracting, whether that be public works, whether that be defense contracting, the Department of Defense contracting outfit, because there's a separate piece again. There are actually security measures. And I noticed in that it was determined that there was a group of folks brought together primarily under the direction, I believe, of deputy ministers or the equivalent thereof. A report was written, and this was a task force, and then at the end, the report was actually put together but not funded. Am I seeing that correctly, in the sense that we actually could have had a task force that gave us a new policy and framework, but then simply the Treasury Board Secretary in this case didn't fund it? Is that what I'm seeing in that piece?
I'll ask Ms. Chang to answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Indeed, the Deputy Minister Committee on National Security commissioned a task force. The task force studied the issues surrounding security and contracting and filed a report, which was supported by the Deputy Minister Committee. The proposal then went forward to Treasury Board Secretariat that was putting together a funding proposal. And at that time, with respect to the fiscal climate, it was felt that there wasn't going to be the funding for it. So that's where the set of recommendations died.
And just so that I'm clear in my head, let me say it out loud. So we strike a Deputy Minister's task force, the highest level of the public service, to talk about security. We get recommendations how we should do security, and we don't fund it. And I'm not asking if you have a yes and no answer to that. I guess, Ms. Chang, I'll take that, but that was a statement.
Mr. Chair, the committee, there is a standing Deputy Minister Committee on National Security. What they did was they commissioned a task force that worked on behalf of the committee to look at the question. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you. So, if I can, to page 57, 2.29, the last part of it, it talks about a policy was actually put together by this government in 2009. They did an update, but it talks about the security and contracting management standard was not revised and has not been updated since 1996. In your sense, when you did this audit, should that have been an update? Should there be an update to that piece? Would it have been effective to have that update?
Mr. Chair, that was something that we expected based on the recommendation that we had made in the previous audit, was that that standard would have been revised.
So this was, I'm assuming, Mr. Ferguson, when you say that, you're talking about the 2007 audit that the department said it would follow through on. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So in 2007, you suggested they needed to update this. They said yes, and yet when you did this one, lo and behold, we still have a 1996 standard.
Mr. Chair, this was a follow-up audit to an audit that we had done in 2007. And overall, we did deem that the progress on this file has not been satisfactory. This area would have been one of the reasons why we deemed that the overall process or progress had not been satisfactory.
And that was my next question about satisfactory, unsatisfactory, but you've already articulated that, Mr. Auditor General. I appreciate that. But at the very bottom, let me just quote into the record out of 2.29. It says, and I'll do it quickly, unlike the previous version of the policy, 2009 policy does not state whether contracted firms with access to protected and classified information are required to hold a security clearance. In our opinion, this is the Auditor General's opinion, in our opinion, this is an important gap that could result in inconsistent application of the policy and thus introduce additional security risk. So not only did it not follow through in 2007, we get to this point of this audit, and lo and behold, we still have the Auditor General saying there's security risk in 2.29. So I'm looking at, let me just get the page for you because it's actually on page 68. There's a chart. It's Exhibit 2.8, and I'll go specifically to national defense. It talks about the number of contracts with security requirements, without security requirements. The total is 48 of the two of them, 25 with, 23 without. And according to your final column, it says the number of contracts incomplete or absent security documentation or improper application of controls is 32 out of 48 for the Defense Department. Not the Transport Department, the Via Rail, or the Postal Service. No offense to either one of those two Crown corporations. They're both brilliant Crown corporations, I think. But this is the Defense Department, and I scribbled very quickly. That translated into 66% of these contracts didn't meet the requirements when it comes to security. Are my numbers off there, or am I correct?
Mr. Chair, we did find, as was stated, that the number of contracts with incomplete or absent security documentation or improper application of controls was 32 out of the total contracts that we reviewed in national defense. Now, I think as we state in 2.69 in terms of that whole exhibit, the majority of the files where there were weaknesses did not present significant security risks, but certainly some of them could have presented significant security risks. Many of them were a lack of proper application of controls, but again, we deemed progress was not satisfactory, and this information is another one of the reasons we felt that progress was not satisfactory. Fundamentally, these things need to be improved so these numbers are better.
Very good. Thank you. Time has expired. I would just note that Mr. Clark has joined us. Welcome, sir. Now we'll begin the rotation anew. One more to go on the former rotation, then the new one. Mr. Saxton, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, very much. Mr. Ferguson, in Chapter 4, entitled Official Development Assistance Through Multilateral Organizations, regarding your concern with the reporting on the use of trust funds at multilateral organizations, the report does not have a formal recommendation. Was there a reason for this?
Mr. Chair, the issue that we had here was on the reporting of these trust funds. I'm trying to recall exactly. I think in 4.61 we talk about the need for the government to improve the statistical report on international assistance. and one of the improvements would be around the trust funds, how much is sitting in trust funds, when it actually gets spent, that sort of thing. So I don't think it's specifically itemized there, just trying to look at it again quickly. But that's where we would like to see the improvement, is in the reporting in the statistical report.
So then your recommendation would be what, therefore?
Well, right now, the way that this type of reporting shows up is when the amount actually, say, goes out of the government's bank account, it shows up in the statistical report as spent, which from an accounting point of view it is, but much of this, or there's often situations where the money is still sitting in trust in the multilateral, so it hasn't actually been spent on the ground in the countries where it's supposed to have impact on poverty levels and that sort of thing. So what we would like to see is something in the statistical report that indicates how much money is in trust, and then sort of a continuity schedule, really, of, you know, how much was there last year, how much has come out because it actually did go to programs, how much more money was put into the trust accounts, and then sort of the balance. So just a continuity schedule that lets people understand that some of this money isn't going to be spent for 2 or 3 years, but some money was spent this year that had gone into trust accounts in the previous year, just to give that full picture.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. CETA's business, as you know, is a multi-year business, and at times it's quite volatile in nature, and I'm sure that you saw this year the situation in Mali, which has changed plans midway. Also, CETA deals with the complex nature of humanitarian crises caused by natural disasters and political crises. Now, given these considerations, would you have general thoughts on considering multi-year budgeting and what some of the downsides are, specifically to accounting and audit?
For multi-year budgeting in general?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, again, that's not something that we have done an audit on. Certainly, I think the concept of multi-year budgets is something in certain cases that is worth consideration. Of course, I think it always runs into the normal issue of appropriations are usually done on an annual basis. So it's not something I can give a definitive answer on, but it's something that is worth discussion.
Can you discuss the challenges that multi-year budgeting might propose with regards to accounting and audit?
Mr. Chair, I don't think that there are any particular challenges that multi-year budgeting would have in terms of accounting or audit. I think it's more an issue of making sure that it can fit within the appropriation process.
Okay, thank you. In Chapter 5, Promoting Diabetes Prevention and Control, you talk about how the report notes that activities related to diabetes have not been fully coordinated at the federal health portfolio level. And I just wanted to mention that, you know, as I'm sure you would appreciate, that all chronic diseases share many common risk factors. In the case of diabetes, for example, such as tobacco and harmful alcohol use, raised blood pressure, hypertension, physical inactivity, raised cholesterol, obesity, unhealthy diet, and raised blood glucose could all contribute to various diseases, including diabetes. The Public Health Agency and our government have taken an approach to address all of these risk factors as a way to reduce chronic disease, including diabetes. And given obesity, for example, is a known risk factor for diabetes, I'm just interested to know why you didn't evaluate or take into consideration the government's efforts to promote weight loss and healthy diet. And I bring this up because our government has made significant investments, for example, in nutrition, education, and awareness raising. Nutrition North, the Child Fitness Tax Credit, Participation, Healthy Living Partnerships with the private sector, all of which support diabetes prevention and should be taken into account when assessing the government's efforts. And I just wanted to ask if you would agree with that.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, when we discussed this issue with the Public Health Agency and so on, we were told that their focus has been on dealing with those common risk factors like childhood obesity and that sort of thing. We were looking, though, at trying to find what the overall strategy was around diabetes, and I think in the chapter we do indicate that there are a number of activities going on, and some of them are good activities. But what we were looking for was that overall strategy that would help bring all of those activities together in a way that helps leverage off of each other, so that they're not just a series of activities, but they are a series of things that are contributing to the meeting of an overall strategy.
Okay, thank you. Time has expired.
Thank you.
We now will begin anew, and we'll start with Mr. Cramp. You have the floor, sir.
Well, thank you, certainly, Chair. A little bit of a different perspective. Of course, my question I will be directing to a CRA should they come before a committee on this, but perhaps you can give me some clarification, because I'm going to wear the hat also of a person who has a 30-some-year experience in business, naturally was and fairly subject to audits, which would be solidly understandable. And so when I take a look at the amount of money that's owing, we certainly recognize the need for penalty and interest accumulation, everything that goes along with trying to encourage people to pay the arrears. The challenge, of course, is how, why, when, and where, and how do we do this? So I'm not going to get into a collection process with you right now, but what I am concerned about, and I'll give you just one quick little hardship case, and then I ask my question. I have a particular constituent owed $1.5 million. They end up paying $1.6 million. They end up owing still another $800,000. Pretty onerous, but of course that's not the question to you. The question to you, when you calculate your receivable, this receivable that is outstanding, the significant accumulation of interest and penalty versus principal, have you actually separated how much is an actual debt and how much is an accumulation of penalty and interest?
Mr. Chair, that information is not in the report, so it's not something that I have, at my fingertips. But I think the one thing that I can say is that, now Canada Revenue Agency does have a better idea of how much of the outstanding tax debt does relate to interest. So it would be a question best posed to the agency.
Fine, thank you. But I just didn't know if you had taken that into account in your evaluation of outstanding receivable, but I'm quite comfortable with your explanation on that, and certainly, given the opportunity, I think that that should come forward in testimony from CRA, so I will certainly ask that. And I do appreciate, perhaps as Mr. Van Kesteren has stated, I have a significant number of agricultural producers in my riding too, and there's a little bit of a contradiction. I wonder if you can just put some clarification for me. In section 133 of your report, under evaluating the effectiveness of programs regarding agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, you state that evaluations should only be counted for coverage once they are completed, because planned evaluations can be delayed or cancelled. However, then, subsequently, in section 152 of your report, it outlines two important benefits of ongoing evaluation. So we have once completed and ongoing. Now, this contradiction appears to be consistently present through the report. And so perhaps you could explain and articulate your position and why they continually sort of contradict themselves, at least from the appearance in the report to someone like myself. Could you give me some justification for that?
I'll ask Mr. Maxwell to answer the question.
Thank you, Chair. We were really talking about two quite separate things. So when we were talking about completed evaluations, that's important because the Financial Administration Act requires that all grants and contribution programs be evaluated within a 5-year period. So in the first instance, it was largely about a legal compliance issue that's set out in the law. In terms of sort of ongoing evaluations and such, that's also an important point, which is about how evaluation has to be very timely, has to be supporting decision making.
Fine, thank you very much. I do appreciate that. Formerly involved in security at one particular point in my past history, I'm a little bit surprised in one way. CSIS plays a pretty important role in the security and safety of our nation, and yet in your status report on security and all the contracting, that there is no recommendation for CSIS at all? Just to curious why.
Mr. Chair, we found in general the practices at CSIS related to security and contracting were good practices. I think we had one place where we noted that, I think it's in 73, paragraph 2.73, we encourage CSIS to strengthen its control for clearances of firms. So essentially we found good practices in CSIS. We found one place where they could maybe just improve, but overall we found that they were doing the things we expected them to do.
Well, great. I can recall, of course, sitting back in the 2007 report on the RCMP performance report. I certainly remember it well. Of course, now in this report, in 291, you have stated that the RCMP now has obviously made some dramatic improvements and uses good practices. So I'm wondering if perhaps you could maybe illustrate a few of those, or perhaps demonstrate why these practices would be beneficial to use in sharing of best practices.
Mr. Chair, I'll ask Ms. Cheng to deal with that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first and foremost, back in 2007, RCMP was lacking in terms of its policies and procedures, so they've done a fair bit on that. Mind you, in this particular status report, they still haven't been able to move forward and produce and have an approved departmental security plan. So that was something we definitely would have expected from RCMP. It was in draft form and it has yet to be approved. So that was still one of the items that they have to work better on. In terms of, I guess, the area of improvements, one of the other things that we've noticed is that they've instituted a quality assurance program. So this was something that was suggested as a result of the 2009 change in terms of the policy on government security, and that's one aspect that RCMP has done as well. In terms of the various contracts that we looked at for the current audit and the follow-up, we looked at about 300 contracts, as the Auditor General has highlighted. By and large, the results aren't bad, but then there are still some shortcomings that RCMP needs to address.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Cramp, we're way over. Thank you. Moving along, Madame Blachette-Lamoutte, you have the floor, ma'am.
Merci. Mr. Ferguson?
Thank you. Mr. Ferguson, I would like to discuss Chapter 6 with you, the record on residential schools. We know that the Commission called upon courts to obtain the documents they wanted, and we know that the courts rendered a decision requiring the supply of this information at the request of the Commission, and then the Department agreed to respect the court's decision. You say in your report that the Department refused to provide certain documents, but there was no analysis in support of this refusal to provide documents. Do you know what the court's decision or the Department's decision was founded upon in refusing to provide the documents?
You're referring to, Mr. Chair, but you know, I think what it was a matter of there was a difference of opinion in terms of what constitutes relevant documents, and the Commission was saying that everything, whether it touched directly or indirectly on residential schools, would be considered relevant. So they wanted every document, and I think what the government did was they said, well, you know, we're going to define relevance, and it was more specific. It was things relating to individual residential schools or policy or that type of thing. So I think that's probably where there was some documents that that maybe the government was saying, you know, they weren't going to provide because they were deeming those to be not relevant.
Et sur quoi se basait-il?
And what did they base themselves upon to determine that a document wasn't relevant? Based on what was that decision made? Because it seems that there was no agreement to cooperate. Why is it that in the view of a department, a document might not be relevant and therefore not be provided?
Mr. Chair, I'm just trying to find the exact place where we talk about the relevant documents, but again, in general, that the agreement called for the federal government to provide all relevant documents, but the agreement did not define relevant. Mm-hmm. And so the government itself made its own decision about what was relevant. Again, sorry, I'm not finding it exactly, but they defined it in terms of, in 21. The search focused on documents related to policies, operations, and funding for residential schools in general, and on documents related to each of the schools named in the agreement. So that was what the government finally decided was the definition of relevant. Now, we also go on to say that even though they had made that definition in 23, they did not share that definition of relevant with the Commission until much later. So I think that's where there was probably a difference between maybe some of the documents expected and the documents provided.
Now, this case went before the courts, and the court asked the department to provide the documents requested by the Commission. And the court seemed to support the request. In response to your recommendation, the department said it would prepare a plan in order to provide the necessary documents. So I'm wondering, necessary documents deemed necessary by whom? Do you know if the department plans on cooperating to establish a plan and to ensure that both agree to a definition of the necessary documents, the required documents, or is this situation going to arise yet again without an agreement on what's necessary? And yet again, the department will have to challenge the department before the courts.
To also clarify, I believe there was the issue of whether the department was going to go through some of the documents in Archives Canada. And fundamentally, I believe that originally they said they weren't going to go through them, that would be something the Commission would have to do, and that's what the courts finally decided on, that the government should be providing those documents. So that was the specific example. I guess it's my understanding that the court has rendered a decision on that, and we would expect that the government would follow up on the decision of the court and would comply with that.
Merci. J'ai une courte question sur
Thank you. I have a short question regarding Chapter 7, Search and Rescue. Since 96, the government was to draw up a national policy for search and rescue. It was not done. I would like to know, in your view, why it wasn't done, and what are the consequences of the fact that we still do not have a legislative framework in that area?
Mr. Chair, we do note in the chapter that I guess in paragraph 7.93 that the government identified the need for a national SAR policy framework in 1976, and there have been calls for it since then as well. We think that putting together that overall strategy would help to identify how, the equipment links to the people and those types of things, what types of service standards people can expect, what level of response people can expect, and putting together that overall strategy is really sort of that umbrella, and that's the starting point of operating the SAR activities in a effective and efficient manner.
Merci, Madame. Time has expired.
Thank you.
You have the floor again, sir.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again, Auditor. I'm going to kind of keep on the same topic. In your report, you reference the fact that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the Department of Aboriginal Affairs could not come to an agreement on the definition of relevant documents. My understanding of the settlement agreement is that the definition of relevance was to be agreed upon by all the parties to the agreement, as churches and perhaps other organizations had similar obligations to disclose documents. In the absence of such an agreement, and in the interest of ensuring timely implementation of the residential schools settlement agreement, the Government of Canada, developed its own working definition so that it could begin to disclose documents. To date, as you're aware, Canada has disclosed almost 3.7 million documents to this commission, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. In your opinion, should Canada have instead waited for the churches, legal counsel for former students, Assembly First Nations, Inuit representatives to come to an agreement before disclosing any documents? And were we caught in a bind? Was the government caught in a bind here? What's your opinion on that, and were the steps they taken appropriate?
Mr. Chair, fundamentally, I guess the issue that we're raising is that the Commission had a 5-year mandate. This was a very large task. As we say in the chapter, Archives Canada estimated that there were 20 kilometres of documents to be searched at least. So in order for this to happen over that 5-year time period, what we wanted to see was that both parties started out with a project management approach, and they defined what needs to be done, where they need to search for documents, what are all the time frames, and that didn't happen. We do state that many documents have been provided. We are concerned, though, about the quality of some of those documents and whether they are of sufficient quality. Now, on the other hand, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission has accepted those documents and put them in their database without there being an agreement on quality. So our concern is, with what's going to be accomplished over this 5 years, whether at the end of it, the relevant documents in the appropriate quality are going to be there, that everyone can agree that this does represent the historical record of what occurred at the Indian residential schools.
Yeah, and I think just for the record, and I know it's in your report, you talk about this 20 kilometers, which represents some 69,000 boxes, and it could cost, according to this report, $40 million to digitize and safeguard, which is a considerable amount of money that is being spent on this project. And indeed, I would argue the government's made considerable progress in implementing the various components of the settlement agreement to date. We see that 97% of eligible common experience payments recipients have been paid. Almost $2 billion has been paid out to over 18,000 claimants through the independent assessment process, and important commemoration projects are taking place across the country. In addition, Canada has gone further through various gestures of reconciliation, including the Prime Minister's historic apology. While we recognize that the provision of these documents to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is important so that future generations will have access to them, would you not agree that Canada has indeed made considerable progress towards achieving a fair, comprehensive, and lasting resolution of the legacy of residential schools?
Mr. Chair, our audit only looked at one aspect of the settlement agreement, which was related to the work on preparing the historical record. So that's the only thing that I can speak to. It's not possible for us to say how far along this task is because there was no project plan in the first place. There's nothing for us to measure against. We don't know whether they're 20% complete, 50% complete, 70% complete, because there's nothing for us to measure against. I can't speak to everything that might have been in the settlement agreement or all the other activities. The audit only focused on the one activity of capturing information related to the historical record.
But on that, I mean, you're talking about a plan and being able to get a sense of what was required, when in fact at the outset that was largely unknown.
Agreed, Mr. Chair, but that's why it would have been important to put together a plan so that all of the steps that would be required to identify what needs to be done, and that there was some way up front to say, well, how would we prioritize things if there are, if we're going to run into some issues. So I guess I would say that, particularly in a task where it's difficult to estimate how big that task is, planning's very important. And understanding all of those risks, those types of things are important so that, when you come across something that is going to be troublesome, there are ways and procedures to react. So I think, again, in this type of a situation, given the size of the task, that it would have been important to have that type of plan in place in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Williamson. And over now to Monsieur Giguère. You have the floor, sir.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to deal with the tax debt made up of $29 billion uncontested and 11 contested for a total of $40 billion, which is immense. So my first question for the auditor is, at 3.32, you say that out of 17 cases out of 39 for recovery with a value of more than $10 million, the agency had not respected its objectives or the documentation was insufficient. This kind of weakness, might it risk emphasizing the difficulty in recovering these monies and collecting the debt?
That refers to the fact that for large accounts, the agency is part of its policies and procedures are to conduct danger of loss reviews. And we identified that they were missing or weren't adequately documented in 17 of the 39 accounts. So their service standard would have been for these danger of loss reviews to have been done and documented in all 39 of these cases. 17, it didn't happen, so they weren't meeting their own level of service. Now, we can't say specifically what the impact would have been on collections had they done that or had they documented it, but it's something that under their own procedures they're supposed to do, and we would have expected that they would have completed all of these danger of loss reviews.
Alors, je vous renfais au...
At 3.42, you talk about the risks. What are the risks of not identifying those taxpayers that the government should go after as priority cases?
Having appropriate risk scoring models in place, is a prime factor in helping the organization determine which accounts to pursue first, so to order which accounts that they are going to pursue for collection. We did note that the agency has made progress in this area, particularly on risk scoring for individuals, but on the risk scoring for corporations, they have deferred that work, so they haven't done that piece of it. So there's still more they need to do to improve on risk scoring, and the better that they get at risk scoring, the better that they can focus in on the accounts with the highest priority to pursue.
Et Monsieur le Président.
And Mr. Chairman, a short question. To the extent that the risk scoring for corporations was not done, but was done in the case of individuals, isn't there some inequity here? You're looking more closely at individuals rather than corporations.
Again, I guess the last time we made the recommendation was for them to look at their risk scoring approaches for both. They determined that I think what it states was that that the cost of doing it on the business side was such that they couldn't do it right now, so they deferred it. But again, we feel that they need to improve their risk scoring methodologies both on the individual side and on the corporate side to make sure that all of the taxpayers that should be in the priority list are in the priority list.
Et une question au niveau...
And with regard to your conclusions at 3.79 and 3.80, you state that the growth of this debt is an embarrassment, bothers you, and you have some reservations. Despite the good things you have to say, you say that this growth in the service cost of the tax debt, this load, is an embarrassment, bothersome. And in the recommendations flowing from the research that was done, you say that there should have been some performance indicators established, and for some time already. So my question is the following. Should that have not been done since 2006? Because we've been waiting for quite some time, and nothing has been done since 2006, and there seems to have been quite a growth in the tax debt since then.
We do note the fact that the tax debt has increased significantly between 2006 and 2012. We do illustrate that that there have been some changes in the tax base. For example, collection of HST and some of that type of thing that accounts for some of that. But fundamentally, there really isn't enough information in the public domain to know whether the $29 billion in tax debt is sort of an appropriate level at this point. We did point out that there were still some weaknesses in the performance information that the agency produces, and we think that that there's room for improvement in that area.
Thank you. Brought your own accompanying choir, I see. It's very impressive, sir. Time has expired, Monsieur. No, sorry. We have one spot left, and it'll be just under 5 minutes, Mr. Dreeshen. You have the floor. Good luck.
Well, thank you, and certainly, as you can tell by the crowd, it's a great report that you've presented. Just a couple of questions with regards to the focus for the audit on the Federal Search and Rescue Services. I wonder if you could go over what that was, describe what the recommendations of this audit were for the Coast Guard.
In general, Mr. Chair, we noted that for the Coast Guard, the equipment was at an appropriate level. We noted that there were, however, some concerns on the personnel side. I guess, for example, the ship captains and so on weren't always getting all of the upgrade training that they needed and that type of thing. So we made some recommendations around the personnel side for the Coast Guard. The information system is a system that is shared. So I think sort of for the most part our recommendations were on the personnel side for the Coast Guard.
And so then in your discussions, what evidence did you have that they're going to be? I know that they've suggested that they have accepted the recommendations. I'm just wondering if in your discussions with them, if you had any more details that you could present to us.
I think, Mr. Chair, again, the only thing that I can say is that in terms of the recommendations we made in this chapter, whether to National Defence or to the Coast Guard, all of the recommendations were agreed to and accepted.
Okay, thank you. I guess I'd like to go back then to Chapter 9 and talk about the employment insurance overpayments. Wonder if you could briefly comment on the importance of the measures such as the EI stewardship review that was conducted as an audit for the EI program in order to help get some better data on the number of ineligible claims.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not recalling right now where we would have referred to that in the chapter, so if there's a specific paragraph reference, that would help me.
Okay. Normally I have that with me, but I don't at this point in time. I guess really when you are taking a look at the data, I mean, it is important if you're going to try to determine which claims are ineligible or try to get a handle on overpayments. Is that something that you had also looked at and how that could be managed?
This will have to be the last question, Mr. Dreeshen.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Ferguson, please.
Thank you.
Yep.
The main item that we looked at really here was in terms of the process, and one of the things we identified was after an inquiry or an investigation starts, it has to go through a certain process. At the end of that process, it has to get a final approval. We identified, for example, that 200,000 of these investigations were underway, but the department estimates that 18,000 of them will not be completed, with a value of about $10 million. So, in terms of looking at the data, we looked at it from the point of view of the whole process, and we think that that's one part of the process that they need to focus in on to improve.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Dreeshen and Mr. Ferguson. So, with that, colleagues, we conclude our hearing. On behalf of the committee and, quite frankly, on behalf of all Canadians, Mr. Ferguson, we thank you, your office and your staff for the work that you do on this report and all the work. It's very much appreciated. Well done. And with that, colleagues, this committee now stands adjourned.